Hey guys, what's up? This is Fula with another video. Shout out to the whole BBC. So this time around, I want to take my attention off of boxing, take my attention off of soccer, and just take my attention off of sports in general. If you go through my last live streams before, and some of my videos before, I talked about a certain character by the name of Nature Boy. And the reason why the reason why I spent time talking about him is because of just the things that he's doing. You know, so basically, what he has been doing, in case you don't know, is he's been basically scamming people and basically been misleading a lot of people in what he calls his teachings, which are not his teachings. They're just him following his own desires. And I'm about to break that down basically right now in this live stream. You know, in case you don't know, like he's very erratic. He says things such as like he's Christ. He says things such as like he's Elohim. He says things like he's from the chosen people and this, that, and the other. He's even went as far as to say that Jesus, was a gangster and Jesus was a basically like a thug, and that Jesus would cuss people out, Jesus would fight, and this, that, and the other. Furthermore, he has gone on to say that you say these things, but you know, in the same essence, he's called himself Jesus. And the crazy thing about it is that, you know, for one, Jesus didn't even marry. Jesus was celibate as they come. You know, Jesus didn't even have any kids. Um, Jesus had very few worldly possessions. There's one tradition that says that he left the earth with just leaving a brush behind. Jesus was a total aesthetic. And, Nature Boy is the opposite of being aesthetic. You see it in his live streams. I mean, just basically based off of the Airbnb and things like that he's staying in. So what I wanted to do today was I wanted to, just kind of put two things together. I was fortunate enough to be brought up in a traditional African household, being that I was born in Africa. So, you know, so it's both a gift and a curse. One thing, you see your country being colonized, but another thing is you have access to some hidden jewels, basically. And so, luckily, I was able to get a hold of some manuscripts which were passed down through my family, and they go back to, you know, my family's teacher, that teacher's teacher, that teacher's teacher's teacher, all the way back to the original ancestor who wrote the manuscript. And, amazingly, in these manuscripts, these are pre-colonial manuscripts. These are before, Europeans set foot in Africa. But it's amazing because they actually like kind of tell, the forecoming of people like Nature Boy, And the reason why I want to go over this is because I want to tell people like there's always a cause and effect thing, and everything, he talks about mentioning being in nature and stuff like that, but everything he's doing is pretty unnatural, you know what I mean? Because nature, as will be seen in these manuscripts, is usually at balance unless there's some human interference, And he says things like being one in nature and things of that sort. But in fact, he's far away from it, you know. And so let me just go ahead and start with one of the manuscripts, basically. And then I'll discuss, you know, things about it. And, you know, sorry if the terms I use are too big, but I just am using these terms to, you know, basically describe what is being read. So, in the first manuscript from the author, you know, may Jah have mercy on him. And by the way, you know, my belief system is an esoteric African belief system. You know, um, in order to for the esoteric system to work, though, you have to have like a written record. You have to have a system basically, and you know, there's certain practices that can be done to implement this belief system. But as you see with Nature Boy, he has no practices. He has no, you know, spiritual training or spiritual discipline. So basically, everything that he's following is just his own desires, as we'll see in this manuscript. And it just goes on to show that, you know, the esoteric system in which he's claiming to follow is pretty much a dead system. And I'm just going to go in right now. I'm looking for the parts of the manuscript that I want to touch on. You know, I'm not going to read all of it because it would be too vast for me to read all of it. You know, it has a lot of information in it. But yeah, I just had to do this because it was on my chest to do. Because you know now we're seeing him deteriorating before our very eyes. You know, because when he had the battle with Polite, when he had the battle with young Pharaoh, it just brought out what was already there. You know, he never was like a master teacher. He never could raise your vibrations. He never could do that. He never was capable of doing this. You know, so in African systems, we use a lot of symbolism. So I'm going to use these things that the author used in a symbolized way. So what the author said, you know, may Jah have mercy on him, Jah, Gino, whatever you want to call the Most High. But anyway, the author said that you know, the bodily limbs act as subjects of the heart. And what he means by subjects, basically, they're like citizens of the heart. They are its servants and they are its tools. You know, when the heart is obedient to the Most High and what the Most High wants, then obedience spreads through the bodily limbs. Obviously, that's the case, you know. But when the heart is not obedient to the Most High, when the heart is not obedient to the natural order, then this disobedience spreads itself, and it spreads all over the body, and it also um, leaves its traces in the form of corruption. You understand me? Because when you see things that have happened with Nature Boy, because he is disobedient to the natural order, to the divine presence, corruption has spread. Because, you know, you see how he took another man's girlfriend. You see that a member of Carbon Nation, whatever he wants to call it, died there. You see all kinds of things, you know? And that's because he has nothing but disobedience in his heart. In fact, there is no goodness in his heart. There's none. Furthermore, the author says the heart is the ruler and the body is its kingdom. And so he goes on further to say the intellect acts as the heart's Secretary of State, you know? So basically, the intellect, you know, is designed to reason, you know, add the reason with the heart, basically, you know. Now, here's where it gets to what Nature Boy is basically. Um, the passions are like prisoners of war that basically reluctantly serve the kingdom. Now, remember, uh, the body is the kingdom. Okay, remember that. And so, is like um, anger is like, you know, it's like you want to, I want to say the author, I'm trying to translate the original language the best way I can, but sometimes you get lost in translation. So the anger is like what you would call like maybe like a sergeant, a lieutenant, basically. And then Satan, you know, the devil, whatever you want to call him, is the enemy, okay, of your kingdom. So Satan is the enemy of your body. And so basically you remember, and I have to remember that the heart is the ruler of the body. And so Satan will always attack the king, okay, and try to destroy his kingdom, which is the body, okay? But to take it a step further, though, um, when your reason assists um, your passions, right? And that anger is placed under the authority, um, the passions and the passions basically, and your anger is placed under the authority of your intellect. Then you can basically check yourself. But Nature Boy is past that point. That's the problem, you know. And I'm gonna go into this right now. I'm gonna go deeper into this by saying, you know, but you know, the heart, okay, and the limbs, if not, you know, checked basically by this, by Satan and the passions, then they'll just be helpers of Satan, you know, and Satan will go ahead and work with your passions, you know, and therefore, working with the passions, they will destroy you. And this is what we see with Nature Boy right now. You know, he's slowly but surely, because he only answers to his passions only, because he's literally a slave of his passions. We literally see Nature Boy being destroyed from the inside out, you know, because he doesn't even use his intellect anymore. He just uses his passions. And so now we see him being destroyed from the inside out now, you know, because his intellect is clouded now by the passions and by, of course, Satan, you know. And so let's see. Let me go on in the manuscript more and figure it out. Okay. Now, we did mention Satan, right? But in reality, you know, Satan really doesn't have any authority over you. you have to give him that authority. You know, you have to give him like ways to penetrate inside of you. And so Nature Boy, unfortunately, has given him ways to penetrate inside of him because in this text, um, you know, the author, may Jah have mercy on him, you know, he wrote about ways that like Satan, you know, evil enters into the hearts. Unjust anger. You know, what did we see when Nature Boy was going at it with young Pharaoh? I'll do this to you, nigga. I'll break your face in 30 pieces. Da, 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 da. Okay. So there you have it. That's basically saying, hello, evil. I'm available. Come in. All right. Another way, corrupt passions. Let's see. You know, Nature Boy claims he practices polygamy, but really he's just practicing a glorified form of being like a orgy, you know, and being just basically hoeing around. And because he gives in to these passions, Satan has entered, you know, his his heart and everything else in him. And so you know, in African esoteric practices, yes, we do believe in a Satan. You know, it's a given fact. You know, Satan's existed before all organized religions. So, you know, that's just what it is. Since the beginning of time, he's existed. Now, another thing too is, you know, Nature Boy claims he eats like, oh, you know, vitamin B6 and all of this stuff, but it's not really a vitamin B6. You know, he's just really greedy. He just likes to eat. You know, when you look at the other carbonation members, they look to be like malnourished, whereas he's like getting fat. You know what I mean? I would go as far as to say he has moves, you know? So that's another way. The thing is, too, Nature Boy, he has a love of adornment. So basically, what he likes is like he likes living in that Airbnb. He likes getting like donations from people. He likes being seen. You know, he likes being on YouTube, being on Instagram Live. He likes the adornment people give him because unfortunately there's people who are driven by the same thing he's driven that follow him. You know, so that's why he doesn't even realize he's a tool of the Satan, you know. Another thing too, he's always in a hurry to do something. You know, it seems like he likes to be in a hurry. Like when things don't happen at a certain time, you know, he loses his mind. You know, and that's another thing about him that needs to be said. You know, he doesn't even take time out to say, well, you know, is this right? Well, you know, maybe I should wait before going into this. He also doesn't realize, you know, he said that money is evil. He said things like that. But what he doesn't realize is, you know, if money is evil, then he's evil along with it because he loves money. I mean, let's be honest. There was that guy there in which he used $300,000 of that guy's money. You know, he blew through 300,000, and then blowing through the 300,000, there was nothing built. There was no planting. There was no agricultural, no agronomy, no nothing like that. You know, he just basically blew through his money. You know, and even when people donate to him, it seems like you know, there's nothing that will satisfy him but more money. You know, I mean, it's gotten to a point where his heart is confused with all types of thoughts. And because he is falling into these things, all of these passions, I'm sorry to say it, but this path means that Babylon is going to fall down for this guy. He's also stingy because, like he claims to be like he claims to invite people there, like invite guys there to how should I say it? To share the wealth, being that he wants he wants guys to like live how he's living, have women and stuff like that. But the reality is quite different because he takes women away from guys. I mean, that's the thing about him. Another thing too that he does, and this is the final thing that I'm going to touch on this, okay? On this part of the manuscript. This concludes this part of the portfolio of the manuscript, and then I'm going to move on to the next part. Now, another thing about him is that he's a fanatic. He's a fanatic because of the fact that he wants to be victorious over young Pharaoh. He wants to be victorious over Polite, but it's not resulting to the truth of the matter, and because the evil has beautified the fanaticism, it just leads him to hatred of young Pharaoh and Polite, and envy of them, which are, hatred and envy comes from the devil too. Actually, I take that back. There's two more parts I want to read about this from this end of the portfolio. He loves rank, He loves people to call him master teacher when really he's not a master teacher. All the master teachers I met in Africa, they never claimed themselves to be such. They just went on with their day and they were pretty quiet. They were pretty reclusive. Even when they held their lecture circles, it was in a small place with just like the bare minimums, and that's another thing too. When you see him, the devil has cultivated this in his heart so much, right? That Natureboy is self-deceived, and because of this self-deception, he's going to be destroyed, man. And you see him being destroyed right before our very eyes. He thinks he's among the redeemed and that there's none like him. But then again, you see him giving lectures to people, right? And he tries to beautify his words to the people, right? And then he also does something that I have to speak out on. He falsely manifests his desire for good for all Black people, because he has evil whispering to him, he is making him think that he's actually guiding people when really he's not. And he just shows off a lot, and he just loves people's acceptance, basically, based on what he says. And yeah. And then he's arrogant too, The thing is, he's arrogant. And the problem is with arrogant is that it's destructive, It's very destructive when you're arrogant, when you I'm sorry to say it, but making your wife or making your whore, that's not his wife. Let me just say it's not his wife. They're his whores, When you make your whores do things like you know, suck on your toes and things like that, that's a form of arrogance. So of course that's going to happen. Now, there's subtypes of hearts, and the thing is about these teachings is it goes back to like Ma'at and stuff like that. It goes back to how Ma'at weighed the heart on the scale, and if the heart was heavier than the feather or something like that, then or the bad deeds of the heart were heavier than the feather, then it's all bad for you. But I don't know how it goes exactly, but it's something like that. Okay. So with Nature Boy, his heart is lethargic, okay? And it just follows corrupt passions and is completely open to Satan. Um, it just become like, so basically, his intellect, cannot like defend itself against like the evil now, because his heart is fond of the evil now. It's fond of corrupt passions and it's inclined to corrupt passions. So this is why you know it ignites the fire of rebellion, and it makes smoke arise to the intellect, and it confuses the intellect. And it just becomes filled with passions. And so his heart now his heart just follows those things. So that's it for the first manuscript. You understand me? And you see everything that I read like just playing out in his like carbonation or herpination, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So let's move on to the next manuscript. Forgive me. There's a lot of them though. You know, there's a lot of this knowledge. Now, this is going to be kind of short in this manuscript, because the language used is heavy language. It's heavy language, and it's very kind of hard to simplify this language. But let me go ahead and see what I can do. Okay. So now, without getting too deep, the author, this is another author. This is not the same one from the first one I read. The author, may Jah have mercy on him. He goes into the orbits of the unseen, basically. And so let me see here. Or he goes into, skip the part I just read. He goes into the orbit of the knowledge of the spiritual realities, and in us as human beings, we're by nature spiritual beings. It's just that, with the corruptions and things that get around us and stuff like that, it just like clouds that. It makes a barrier, so that's why it happens in the way it happens. So let me see here. Now, the Most High, let me see. Okay, here we go. So the Most High, we call him Gino in my tongue, the Most High said that, I'm going to just mention one of the self manifestations, because there's a lot and it will take too long to go through all of them. So that's why I don't want to mention them all because there's so many of them. Okay, so I'm just looking for it right now. Okay. Okay, here we go. So, I'm not gonna with making a long story short, there's a whole unseen world. Actually, there's unseen worlds, you know, and in African cosmology, epistemology, whatever you want to call it, part of our belief is we have to believe in those things. Okay, so I believe in it. You don't have to believe in it, but I'm just talking from that perspective of someone who believes in the unseen, someone who believes that there's more than one Earth, someone that believes that there's a lot of secrets that are hidden from us. So, you know, the fiery orbit is Geno's self manifestation of being a constrictor. And when you see Nature Boy and stuff like that, he talks about living in nature and things like that. But in reality, he's not living in nature. He's living in a fiery orbit. Therefore, he's constricted, to just he's constricted in a sense that he's intellectually constricted, physically he's constricted, mentally he's constricted, emotionally he's constricted, logically he's constricted. His followers as well are in the same boat as him. Okay. And you saw that manifest itself when he went to jail in Costa Rica, you know, because Gino has constricted his mind and constricted his logic, because Nature Boy again has been uh, overcame by his desires only, you know. So therefore, that has led to constriction. And because the fiery orbit is so constricted, now when you look at things in the full spectrum, he's even constricted to who he can have like sexual relations with, because of the simple fact that he has herpes, and a lot of them there have herpes, so even they're constricted to who they have sexual relations with, because they brought that on themselves, unless they do some shady stuff and not tell people like, hey, I have herpes, which I'm sure they are capable of doing, Okay. So I'm going to move on to the third manuscript out of four. And I want to move on to this manuscript because it kind of hits the nail right on the head, So this is why I'm going to move on to this. Okay. Let's see. I would read all of the manuscript, but it's too much information. I can only give you the parts that relate to him, Okay. Now, let's see here. So now we're going to get into the kind of elemental, but still esoteric realities of being human beings, basically. Um, you know, let's see. When Gino, when he created like certain things, he created it um, you know, he created it in perfection. It's just that we were the ones to imperfect it. And so, he used symbolisms again. So the orbit of fire is an outward aspect of Geno's will, and the orbit of air is an outward aspect of his life, and the orbit of water is an outward aspect of his knowledge, and the orbit of earth is an outward aspect of his power. And we see that taking place, right before our very eyes. Basically every living thing was created out of water. Therefore, every living thing was created out of knowledge. And when you look at the earth, the earth, the orbit of earth is like aspects of his power, because let's just look at the mountains. Look at how big they are. You can't move a mountain. Rocks go to the bottom of the ocean, you know. Earthquakes, that's from the earth. The crust, the core, everything, that's just a sign of his power, you know. Okay. So now let's move on. Let's move on. And I have a talisman in this a manuscript. It's a talisman, and it has 16 squares. Now, in the last 4 squares, it goes back to what I was saying before, that natural life, which is humidity, and it's about outward appearance is air, natural knowledge, outward manifestation of water, natural will, which is outward manifestation of fire, and natural power, which is outward manifestation of earth. Now, let's look at the fire. Let's go to the fire and look into this in more detail. Okay. Hey, so greetings to you. Now, when we look at the fire of Natureboy, the thing is let me see. Let me find what I'm looking for. Okay, here we go. Or at least I thought I found it. These manuscripts hold a lot of information. So, okay, here we go. I found what I was looking for. Now, with Natureboy, the thing is that God, since Geno, he doesn't make mistakes, God created demons and thoughts and whispering from of an absolute fiery nature. Furthermore, he this station is also natural desire. You know that saying, burning desire, like, oh, I have a burning desire, or things like that. The only problem is if your desires aren't checked by the other natural dispositions that I named, and you're overtaken by this desire, then again, it goes back to the first manuscript, that I read. You basically become a servant of this shaitan. And Satan is the unfortunately, Satan is the leader of this of this like station, basically, and so because he's the leader of this station, he invites people to their natural desires and their lower requirements. So that's what happens. So you know This is a problem. And the bad part about it is they have authority over the human hearts, and they get this authority over the human hearts through whispering, seduction, enticement, inducement, and things like that. And even Gino in my tongue says, do you take uh, Shaitan and his children as friends? And so basically everything that God, Gino, the Most High, stands for is opposite of what Shaitan stands for. Gino wants us to live in peace with nature. Gino wants us to live in harmony with nature. Gino wants us to be in peace, in tune with ourselves, you know? But because nature has basically been encamped in that fiery orbit, he's now burning, literally burning. I mean, let's start with the herpes. His hair, just look at his hair. I guarantee you, if I put a match to his hair, it would catch fire because he's done. Like, I mean, it's burning from the inside. His desires are literally burning him and everybody around him. Look at his babies to be. Like, look at the mothers who's carrying the babies. They look dry, crusty, even like him. He looks dry, crusty, and stuff because guess what? He lacks knowledge, and knowledge comes from water. Using that in a symbiotic way, basically. So you see what's happening to him, and he's just burning, and he doesn't even realize he's burning. I mean, when you look at his lives, his face looks like dry. He looks ashy. And it's because what he's putting into his soul and because he's putting all this fire, all these things into his soul and not checking his soul, it's just manifesting itself outwardly to everybody involved, meaning all of his followers, the people who donate to him, and the people who actually think that what he's doing is right. I mean, even his vitamin B6 diet is unbalanced. It's not in tune with how we should be eating. If you're eating his so-called vitamin B6 diet, you're kind of asking for bad symptoms. So it should be stayed away from. And you got to look at the fact that he doesn't really do any activity. Like when you look at his body structure and the rest of the carbonation body structure, I'm going to tell you something. In Africa, when you're living in the village and when you're living in like a communal village setting, you really don't need to work out because your body is already fit, because it does work. It does it's involved with, like, for example, the women, they're pounding the cassava, they're pounding the plantain, they're pounding these things. So, the women are toned, and I hate without me sounding like a pervert, they have the natural badonkadonk that's firm, that's not like jiggling around or anything like that. It's firm, it's healthy. And the men, because they're working, because like in my tribe especially, we herd cattle, they're naturally strong, because they're butchering meat and stuff like that. So they're naturally strong. They naturally have six packs, by nature. And so because of that, they're just fit, they're ready for whatever. When you see carbon nature, they look docile. Like, I mean, they look like they don't do nothing. Like their physiques are like draggy, and they're on the floor, and Their chests aren't like, it's like saggy. Everything is saggy and stuff like that. And the women just don't look like, you know, I'm sorry to say it, but the women don't like really look like women. They look like they're barely surviving. A definition for me of a real woman is like she keeps up with herself in every way and form, including exercise. If she has to exercise, then let her exercise. All right, so one more, and then I'll end this live. I've been on here for, dang, it's getting on like 45 minutes. But it's a lot of information that I had to go over. Okay, let's see. Let's see. And this will be the last point I make. This will be the last point I make. And then I'll be done. Okay, let's see. Okay. I just want to say that everything by nature, human beings are the best of creation, but it's just that since these things aren't checked, we let it get the best of us. And that's what happened with Nature Boy. He let the fire and the passions get the best of him. Now, um, now this is gonna be all I'm gonna say about the whole thing. This next thing, although knowledge, and this is what the author is saying. May Jah have mercy on him. And the reason why, by the way, I keep on saying God have mercy on the author is because just to show a sign of respect to the ancestors. The ancestors hear this thing and the ancestors appreciate this. And, even the ancestors may come visit you in a dream state and say things like, hey, you did a good job. Thank you for keeping my way alive. I'm not saying it's happened to me, but yeah. So now it says, even though knowledge has diffused and spread, some quarters among the lost have been completely oblivious of this knowledge due to the darkness of the natural creation and its laws. As a result, they refuse to believe that the cosmos has a deity or a creator, and they, out of their ignorance, attribute phenomenal events and laws to nature, the movement of and laws and to nature, the movement of the planets and stars. Um, Basically, they're drowning in the sea of darkness, and they think it's a natural phenomenon, and they will even more be forever devoid of sincere understanding of the Most High. And what do we see with Nature Boy? I mean, Nature Boy thinks he is the Most High. Nature Boy thinks he's Christ. Because he thinks these things and stuff like that, his heart is completely dark and full of fire, and it's devoid of understanding. Therefore, that's why he's the way he is right now. That's why he's decreasing day by day. And without saying anything, I wouldn't be surprised if like in the next couple of days, that he has a complete nervous breakdown where he is completely just gone. He's completely gone to a point of no return. He's almost at the point of no return, but we just have to remain and see what is going to happen. For those who do tune in, I appreciate it. If this video resonates with you, go ahead and like it. Go ahead and comment on it. and give me your thoughts. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you want to see more from this video. I'm off until the next one. Njarama.